Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for being there. We have the amazing Lindsey Scharmyn with us for part 2 of our conversation on healing past lives with tarot. And also we're going to go a little bit deeper now by looking at what ways there are to recover some of that information and of that power that we've been cultivating through many lives and reawakening them in this one in order to help us and to assist us in this multidimensional, multi-incarnational journey that we are in. And one thing before we start also is that language is such a double-edged sword, because one of the main words, I, is so confusing, because especially when we're in these subjects, when we are recognizing that, like I said before, we are living two different lives or two lives at the same time. So when we say I, sometimes we mean this one and sometimes we mean that one. Or and sometimes even in the same phrase, we say I a few times, and the different times we are referring to the different parts of ourselves, and it's not very clear. So sometimes that generates, or probably many times that generates confusion. And well, there's so many other words that generate confusion. For that, if people are interested, I'm just remembering I had this conversation with Dani Katz. I don't know if you've ever spoken with her. She's a friend of Emily. And I've had this conversation with her on the verb to be, how it's irregular, but it's supposed to be the most regular thing we all are, but we've chosen or it's been given to us such an irregular word to describe it, and how in Spanish we even have two words that it's kind of, we have to be and we separate it in two parts. So in Spanish it's even a little bit more complex. But I'm bringing this up. I don't know really why, but I was just talking and heard myself saying, trying to refer to one half or the other, and remembering how language confuses stuff.
Yeah, I can't remember now. I used to be so good at Spanish that I knew exactly what you're talking about. Now my brain is like, yeah, there were two to be verbs, but I can't remember what they are or
Can I tell you?
what the
You want me to
difference
tell
is.
you?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. You have ser.
Ser, yeah.
Ser
Yo
is
soy.
yeah, yo soy.
Okay.
Very good. Is the one that I would connect most with the most usual way of saying to be. I am whatever years old, or I am happy. But then we have estar, which is also to be, but it's more like connected to the physical in one way, So you say, estoy aquí, I am here, I am in Uruguay. In English, it's the same word.
Right.
But in Spanish, for some reason, we separate it, and it makes total sense in Spanish. Yeah. And even then, learning in English that it's just one word, it doesn't really make any kind of dissonance, at least it didn't for me. So it's kind of like both things make sense, but yeah, for some reason we separate it in two in Spanish.
Yeah, one is more sort of qualitative and nebulous, and the other is more sort of physical and like constricted almost, or something. That's very interesting.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, it seems more appropriate to have multiple, like you're saying, to describe both multiple aspects of our being, but also to differentiate between which one we're talking about. Even when I'm talking, I always divide into four. There's actually more than four, right? But for me, it's most helpful for people to think about our body, our heart or our emotional body, and then our mind or our mental body, and then our soul or our spiritual body. There's more than that. It's more complicated than that, but that's really helpful for us at least to see that these things are all different, but they're all us. We are all those things, but they each have sort of almost like a layer and a different aspect of being and a different function in our life. So even that, let alone, this kind of oversoul or the higher self aspect, which is yet another sort of aspect of that. There's a lot of us going on.
Yeah. It's at the start, when you're starting to learn this stuff, it feels so complicated and so complex. But once you start rooting all that information, all that knowledge in the actual experience of life from your human perspective, you start realizing, oh, this is talking about this is talking about that. And yeah, like the very basic thing we were just talking about with the verb to be, when it makes sense when I explain that part of your being is like existence, and part of your being is like presence or something like that. Is part of it exists, and it exists somewhere, something like that. So those are kind of like the two sides of, but we did a very good job with Danny Katz on that show. I recommend, if you're interested in the subject, look it up. And let's check out the shoulder thing, the dictionary of the symbolic meaning of the physical world, and of, in particular, of the physical body. There's this thing that I recently learned a name for, called dream walking, I think was the name, which I don't know, I got to that intuitively, or through my own experience, of understanding that the physical world, is a reflection of your inner world, and everything that you see, some things are more so than others, but everything that you experience in life is like in a dream, just not just, but a symbol that is actually conveying a message to you. And it's all connected to this dipping the toe in the water and learning the lessons that you have in this life. And that's kind of partly why the basis behind magic, even, it's like certain things have certain symbolism. They represent certain even planets and certain etc., because there's like these, I don't know if the correct word is archetypes, but there's these energies that are represented or manifested in the world, and they are all just coming from within you. And so your body is a fractal of that itself. So different parts of your body represent different emotional states, and even different lessons, let's say. And so we were talking in the first part, if people haven't seen it, we were talking about many things, but in part about a particular past life experience that you remembered, where there was something connected to your shoulder, and we wanted to see what these guides, which are not like the all-knowing truth, but what these guides have for us. So if you want, you could go ahead and go first, and I'll look at mine after.
Yeah. And it's very well said about the symbols and the archetypal energies and the fractal nature of this, right? That's that as within, so without, as above, so below, sort of hermetic aphorism that we hear so often, is that it's true, right? And part of that I always want to emphasize to people is that as much as it has its own sort of morphogenetic field, or its own egregore, or this thing building over time, or all these people are looking at it and saying this, and it's reflecting this, and so it is that, right? It does have that energy, right? Like we do associate Saturn with discipline and, like, this sort of hard work and, structure. But also there is the personal, like where you are at in the fractal, in the design, and where you are at and where you're looking at Saturn might be very different than what other people have kind of gathered and collected there. It doesn't mean that what's gathered and collected there isn't true, but there's always room for that personal. And I think we were sort of talking about this when I was describing my Handel tarot deck, and the sort of impressionistic art that they use, and how that allows for, in that moment, in that reading, some new aspect can kind of come out of this card or this placement. And I think that's really important for people to remember when we talk about symbols and meaning and these things, is that you shouldn't look at it as a hard, fast rule. And you shouldn't look at it as a construct that you can't get outside of. You should just look at it as a sort of guide. It tends to be like this, but is there something else for me that comes out of that, right? Because it is very important for us to look at that. And this is kind of Jungian, right? Like in the dream, everything is you. So how do you feel about the thing? I can go tell you what I think your dream means, but you're the one who experienced it. So what I say is coming from my perspective to some degree, even if I'm being very objective, and you're the one actually in it. And here's another kind of further example. If you're in a dream and a wolf runs up to you, well, for me, it'd be like, awesome, a wolf is running up to me. Like, I'm going to hug this wolf. This wolf is so cool. And for someone else, it would be terrifying. You go, oh my God, the wolf's going to eat me. And they'd run away. Right. And that's important. It's important to know what it means to you and to let yourself have that ability to relate to it and determine your own understanding of it. So don't always let, outside things tell you what something means, right? And this is especially true when people say, oh, this thing in dream always means this for everybody in the whole universe. Like, no, it doesn't actually. Maybe most of the time it might, but sometimes it doesn't. So just let yourself have some of that wiggle room. But getting back to the shoulder, this is in Louise Hay's Heal Your Body. And the first time I came across this, it was a way bigger book than this. This is a tiny little pamphlet almost. And the first time I saw this years ago, it was like a dictionary. It was like a big book. So I can't find that. I would love if anyone knows where that book that I'm thinking of exists, because it has even more information in it. But this, when I get to shoulders, it says they represent our ability to carry our experiences in life joyously, and that we make life a burden by our attitude. And that kind of fits the energy. It doesn't say anything about sort of elitism or judgment or anything, except that I had that attitude. I definitely made my life a burden in that life by carrying that attitude. And it has been a burden since then, in the pain that I carry from that wound that I created for myself, and also in the level of vigilance, like we were talking about, that I sort of have to have throughout this life to not go back to that mindset and that energetic space and that ego trip. So she also gives a mantra for each of these areas if you're, wanting to bring a better energy there or just release something from there. And this says, I choose to allow all my experiences to be joyous and loving. And it's interesting too, when I'm saying that, I sort of feel that life, the reason I was like that is I was so terrified of being abandoned and of not having enough. And those are also this life, I have those fears, those really deep fears also. I've gone about them in a different way, thank God, right? But that was my reaction to having these deep fears of abandonment and of not having enough, is I was going to control people. I was going to make sure they knew that I was better than them, and I was going to make them do what I needed them to do. And I was going to take from anyone I could in order to make sure that I had enough. So to say instead, I choose to allow my experiences to be joyous and loving, you really can release some of that, right? Like, you're not going to be abandoned by everything, everyone, like there is love in the universe. Allow your experiences to be loving, right? And stop trying to control everything. Like, just allow your experiences to be joyous. So even though it's not like she didn't say anything about elitism or judgment or control in this entry, you can see sort of the energetic similarities of, the situation in general for that life. And this mantra would be perfect, to help bring more love to that root cause, right? If we're going back to the karma idea, the root cause of all of that is where we want to do the healing so that we don't recreate this karmic cycle. And that mantra would do that. So I love that. I can't wait to hear what yours says.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, let me see. I'm gonna share the screen. It's in Spanish, but it's gonna be easier for me to read it and be able to see you as well over here. All right, very good. So here it says shoulders. So it has three different things, but I'm not going to complicate with the explanation. It's kind of like, one is simply put, it's kind of like the description, like a very normal description of what the shoulder is for, or the part of the body. Mm-hmm. Then it explains what you just said, kind of like the symbolic thing. And then it gives you, there's a guide at the bottom that gives you a certain questions that you can ask in order to continue healing. And so the final part kind of gives you the therapeutic look at the thing, and like what the message could be from the thing. But just to say, it goes a little bit deeper than just the 3 paragraphs, but I'm going to go ahead and read them. So I need to move the thing over here. Oh, there we go. So, all right, I'm gonna move the screen. That's gonna be easier. Very good. Okay, so the shoulder joins the arm with the torso, it says, and it's a complex articulation, extremely movable, or what's the word for it? It's extremely mobile. That gives allows us to do ample and large movements and very precise in all directions. Okay, so the following description says the person that is having pain in their shoulders has the impression of carrying a big load on top of them, you know, similar to what you were saying.
Yeah.
Like this pain has a relationship with wanting to do too much for others. This person is not allowing themselves to go in the direction that they desire because they believe that they're forced or that they must take care of the happiness or of the success of others. In general, this pain can manifest in a person that has the capacity to act or to do. The message is to not stop. The message is not to stop doing different things in your life, but to do them for love instead for the obligation of having to. If the pain stops you from being able to move your arms, the message is related to the difficulty to embrace a person or a new situation. That's interesting. And so finally, it says, your shoulder pain indicates that you impose tasks on yourself that are unnecessary for you. When you try to do too much for others, you force yourself to carry on your shoulders a weight that doesn't belong to you. As long as you continue doing this, others cannot learn to take care of themselves, which would be a very unintentionally selfish thing to do, right? I suggest, it continues saying, I suggest you verify your commitments. Did you promise those persons that you would take care of everything? Or even more, do you think that this is automatically implied in your relationship with these people? It's time that you revise your limits and your needs and to just carry on your shoulders that which corresponds to what you want. Give yourself the right to love yourself and to take care of yourself. Take notice or become aware that what you impose on yourself comes from yourself, and that others will respect your needs when you respect them. That's very strong and powerful, yeah. And finally, more so, give yourself the right to be more flexible and to embrace those you want and what you want without fear of consequences.
Wow.
Yeah,
it's really interesting for me when I'm listening to that, specifically talking about this past life wound and, you know, what I've carried into this life. It seems like there's almost this overreaction from me, because in this life, I've very much been the, like, don't worry, I'll take care of everything for you. I'll give you everything. Like, it's like, you're better than me. Like, I'm nothing, you know, and that's the exact opposite of what I was doing in the previous life, but it creates the same pain, actually, right? I can actually feel it as you're talking about it. I'm like, yeah, that is also when it hurts, is when I'm giving too much. And this has been one of the major struggles, I'll say, of my life, is to stop doing that. And this is actually, I talk about leaving teaching, which was my previous profession for 14 years. And that's why I left it, because I was like, I can't keep giving my whole self away to everybody but me. I have to give myself to me first. And now I help even more people, I feel like, on an even more profound level because of that. So my goal was to, you know, help other people, and I was doing it in this wrong way. It was really actually taking from me and hurting all of us, and enabling people to do some pretty crappy things. You know, the people who want the type of person who gives too much of themselves are often they're being enabled in their own bad behavior. Yeah. So I kind of overcorrected for this same sort of, pattern that I was trying to heal. And now I needed to heal the overcorrection. Got to find this middle balance, right?
Yeah,
the middle path is the way.
the pendulum. Yeah. It swung too much one way on one life. And you
the
kept,
other way.
Yeah, you kept the reminder. And on this life, it kind of swung a little bit too much on the other side. And yeah, part of the work now is returning to center, which is a beautiful opportunity, even though it can be very challenging. Yeah, for me, it's kind of similar. I also mentioned in part one that I also have this shoulder pain, and I'm trying to connect it to my own unhealthy patterns, let's say, and yeah, many times I've kind of repressed how I feel, or not followed how I feel in order to satisfy somebody else, due to feeling that way I would be accepted and I would be safe, So yeah, the shoulder pain. I could try to remember how old I was and what situation I was living at the time that it came up for me, and see what I can learn even deeper from that. This was powerful.
Yeah, and one of the really powerful things about that, if you go and you sit and you get quiet and you just start to sort of remember, like, when have I felt this pain and what was going on while you're doing that, and I think you probably know this, but maybe some of the listeners will be helped by hearing this. While you're doing that, you can talk to yourself then, right? And you can send yourself messages and you can say, like, I'm really sorry that I didn't have better boundaries. I'm really sorry that I didn't speak my needs and my truth. And I'm really sorry that I gave up, that chance to create what I needed so that someone else could have what they needed. And please forgive me. I actually love me. I love you, me. and I want us to be happy and healthy and safe. I want us to have all our needs met. And I am now more and more doing that for myself because I love myself. So thank you, right, for letting me correct this and for releasing whatever pain from this so that we can heal together. And you can just have this sort of conversation and forgiveness, and it's really powerful, especially because so many of us, especially in this type of healing work, in this type of dynamic where we give too much and we want other people to have everything they need and we don't think of ourselves, especially then we have a hard time often of forgiving ourselves. A lot of times we have a lot of guilt and shame, and that can be at the core of what's driving us in that, right? We're trying to make up for something from who knows when, other lifetime, this lifetime. Usually it's perceived and not even real anyway, but therefore we have all of this guilt and shame. We haven't forgiven ourselves. So it can be really powerful to just go back and talk to yourself, give yourself love, give yourself forgiveness, give yourself that grace, and you can be pretty surprised by how well it helps you to release that. Physically, you might not have physical pain anymore, or not as often, or not as severe, but also the emotional can just unleash, right? If you go back and do that a lot of times, people will find they just start bawling and crying because that's still stuck back there, and it hurts, and it actually needs to be released. So I always tell people, if you can get to that point when you're crying and releasing, you're doing a great job. Like, this is the real healing, that's what needs to come out. So I think that can be so powerful. It's almost like a self-hypnosis, or it's almost even like a sort of mini soul retrieval that we can just do on ourselves. We don't need a shamanic worker, or a light worker to do that, because we all are shamanic light workers, whether we know it or not yet, whether we've realized it or not yet. We all have that capacity. And just doing what we just talked about is one way of inviting that further and further, that level of healing.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. It's really, really helpful. I'm gonna practice it, because I hadn't, you have all these tools, but sometimes you don't put two and two together of, like, oh, I could use this for this.
All the time.
Yeah.
This is why I have lists around my house of like, remember, you can do this thing. Remember when you go into like
Yeah.
triggered, or you start being like
Mm.
whatever, reactive towards people, or you're angry, or you're depressed, or you're having all this pain, or remember all these things you can use and try.
Mm.
And because I forget, I do this all day, every day with people,
Mm.
and I still forget. So you're not alone, you know. And I think part of that again is that karma. It's that inertia. Like we haven't been doing that so often. We have way
Right.
more lifetimes and way more activity and thought and whatever that's on this sort of other side of forgetting and, you know, continuing to just react mindlessly than we do on the side of, all right, let's consciously go after this. Let's sit with it. Let's invite this energy, like way less experience there. And so we just have to get more and more practice. So this is why it's good to have these reminders around us. You know, this is why I have this, what I call an altar, even though it's not a traditional magical altar. It's more just like a sacred, you know, space of honor. But that's why I have it here out in the open. I'm pointing to like right behind me, right? Because it reminds me. I look and I see, you know, this little guide or ally, and I go, oh yeah, thank you so much. Like, you're present in my life. I love that. I can ask you for help. I could sit right now and just receive from you and talk to you, or I have my little sound tool, or I have this or this or this and all these things, so I can remember to use them.
Mm. Yeah, sometimes the physical world, you know, it blinds us, or it's so enticing that we forget, or we even in certain moments, you know, when we need the most to make use of the spiritual tools, a little part of ourselves will be like, that's spiritual bullshit. That's not gonna do anything for me. I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling triggered by whatever. It's only gonna be fixed by something physical or whatever. So we go and we eat, or whatever it could be for each
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah. Well, it's just that habit. It is. It's just that habit. That's the karma, right? And that's the inertia of it, that, you know, this is what we've done and we've done and we've done and we've done and we've done. And now we're trying to switch that, right? And we're trying to go a different direction. Like, that's really, it's hard. This is why I say to people too, like, every single bit of progress you make, just celebrate it. Go, oh yeah, like I did that. That's awesome. Like, I remembered to meditate today. That's like, woohoo, good job, me. Or right. Or I, you know, made a list of the things that help me when I'm angry or sad or in a triggered state or whatever. And good job, me. Right. Or I asked someone for help and good job, me. Like, all these things, just remember to give yourself credit for them, because it is all that inertia, all of that habit built up over how many lifetimes and years, and you're changing that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
You know, what came to me before when you were speaking is that we've been, when you first mentioned this practicing and repeating the self the self discriminating talk or whatever, is that we've been practicing this kind of Kali Yuga attitude for so long that we've forgotten what it feels like to be in this Satya Yuga kind of state. And that's what we are remembering and restarting to practice. But we are like so far away. And it also gave me this perspective of how good and how large and how immense and infinite our inner world can be, and as well as the outer world, that the best we can feel today, there's even something even bigger tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, until if we are not in what's known as the golden age. Just, it's like, wow, how amazing it could be to be in those periods. But again, let's reach for feeling as good as we can today, you know, without comparing it and being, oh no, but in another time it was even better. It doesn't even matter, because reach to whatever potential you can reach today, and tomorrow do it again and do it again. And yeah, it's so beautiful, the reminder of celebrating the small things, you know. We meditate 5 minutes and we're like, oh no, I was totally distracted. But you meditated 5 minutes, so give yourself an applause for that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have people too who are like, but it's so hard. I'm not doing it right. And I'm like, you might not do it right for a long time. Like, that's not the point at all. The point is to practice, right?
Yeah.
And the point is to have any level of presence that's amazing, especially in the Kali Yuga, like you're saying, we have this, every single thing around us, every opportunity is calling us to go deeper into the darkness. And you chose to step back and create some light. Even if you feel like you didn't do it that well, you did it. It's amazing. And but my attention keeps going out and just keeps like thinking about all these things. That's everybody. That's very few people in the world are practiced enough that they actually can just stay present the whole time and have no distraction and, reach that oneness state. Like, that's very rare. You're working towards that. You're not just going to instantly be amazing at, well, some people are, very rarely, but very rarely, most of us are in that same exact experience. So again, you just want to give yourself credit for any level of connection you have achieved or given yourself or chosen or are practicing. It's all really amazing. And you really will find very quickly, in fact, that things progress probably beyond what you expected, right? Especially because we think we're doing so poorly at it. And it's actually that we're doing very good. We're comparing ourselves to this like final version of this like perfected golden state. And it's like, no, I mean, everybody, you had to think of any other skill in your life, tying your shoes, learning how to write, learning how to talk. Like, you didn't just jump to perfection. You had all of this place along the way. But, we used to be, I think, when we were kids, in more of a mind state of like, yeah, I'm getting it as I go and it's cool and I'm where I'm at and everything's fine. And yeah, now we're much more like, I need to be perfect. And here's, I know what perfection looks like. And it's like, well, just let it go, and just give yourself where you're at. There's a reason you're where you're at. The whole process actually has gifts at every point along the way. You're going to receive them as you go, and they're perfectly timed and they're beautiful and it's amazing. It's awesome. So yeah, it's hard for us to let go of all that self-judgment about it, and what it should be. And I don't think it's very helpful that, there's 10 billion people and examples and videos and, books and things, because I think people get really overwhelmed, like, well, which one's right and which way is right? And, how do I actually like meditate, for example? There's a million ways to meditate, and so you can pick just one that feels good to you and follow that person's example or that way of doing it. But we really have to then even let go of the right way, right? Like, which one? It's like, pick one. There's so many. And people talk about like, oh, well, you're supposed to breathe like this. There's a million ways that you can breathe, right? When you're meditating, and all of them have a different effect, maybe, or a different goal or a different purpose, or maybe some are just easier for you than others. And you really kind of have to trust your intuition and your own, and just let yourself try things and just let yourself kind of play and be in that. There's no rush, there's no pressure, and there's no one right way. So it kind of is freeing when you can like let go of all of that and just see how vast it is, and that you're just making progress, and that's great.
You remind me of an exercise to that will help people understand how hard it is to learn something new, even in this lifetime. So it's writing a letter. It implies a previous exercise where you connect with your inner child. But whatever, write a letter, 3 paragraphs, beginning, middle, and end, to yourself, acknowledging how much you love yourself, how good you are, how much you respect yourself, but do it with your other hand. What's it called? With the non-dominant hand. Do it with the other hand, and see how that feels. See what it feels like to learn to write from zero. And that's and observe all the judgment that might come up. Observe. I don't want to give the ending away, so just observe everything that comes up, every sensation, every emotion, every feeling, every thought. Observe them. Not every one of those, but whichever ones you can. Just observe the experience, be present during the experience and see what it feels like. And then you can, with your other hand, write a response back, or actually from the, well, whatever. Yeah, use the normal dominant hand to write a response back if you want, and And yeah.
I love that. That's so
Yeah.
powerful. Yeah, because we do forget. It's been a while for most of us since we've learned anything brand new,
Yeah.
or tried an absolutely fresh skill that we have no previous connection with. Which meditation is. Spiritual skills in general are that for most people. Most people have been raised in an environment that is not very spiritually minded. Even religion isn't as common today as it was, right? So a lot of people are just raised in this sort of like void, like there is nothing there. There's very little connection there. There's very little idea of like what it's supposed to be or how it's supposed to be or what the actual truth is. And so it is very, very fresh and new. It would be like writing with your non-dominant hand. I like that example and that practice a lot.
And so when we're thinking about abilities and stuff that we learned in previous lifetimes, and we even developed and perhaps even mastered in another life, and we are thinking, okay, I want to bring some of that into this lifetime. What how can we go about it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would almost say like while you are doing, let's say I was going to learn piano tomorrow and I don't know piano, right? Then instead of pretending like I can just, okay, I know for sure there's a lifetime where I knew piano really well, and so I'm just gonna like quantum leap that into here, and now I'm just gonna know piano perfectly. That's maybe some people have that skill, most of us don't. So instead of doing that, right, we can just call on that aspect of our soul and just say like, hey, soul, I love you, I appreciate you, I honor you, thank you so much for being in connection with me. The part of me that has experienced piano before, that has practiced it so much that maybe became an expert, proficiency level in piano, please come and just help me like learn this even faster in this body, help these muscles and this brain create those pathways like I used to have, and make it just more present for me, that echo of those things, so that it's just a little easier, a little faster, a little better. And thank you for being present. Thank you for allowing me to recall this into my being. And you can do that before you go into practice each day, right? Before you go into actual learning of this each time you're practicing it. Now that we're talking about that, you could do that for meditation too, right? I know there's a lifetime where I was way better, more practiced at meditation, right? Let's call that lifetime forward in love and appreciation, and ask for that gift of reconnection to that level of being, because it really is out there in the, even if you look at it as your oversoul, your higher self, the collected experiences of your specific soul, or you look at it as the collective, conscious or unconscious or whatever, right? It's out there. And it really is just this body, the muscles don't have the muscle memory of it, right? Because this body hasn't experienced it yet, but the mind has, the heart has, the soul has. So it is there, it is in connection. And, sometimes when we see these children come in who are just like amazing, there's like that, God, what was, she was like 5 or something, and she was painting these portraits that were like unbelievable, like masterpieces. Clearly she came in with the muscle memory of that from this previous lives or something, right? Or she could just tap into that. There's got to be some people who are just way better at this, that level of bringing things through, or just remembering it, coming through with it still intact. So we know these things can happen. And another way of looking at it is our cells, in our DNA has the genetic epigenetic memory as well. So even if you kind of aren't really with the past life thing, and it's hard for you to conceive of like the oversoul or the collective conscious and that being something that you're connected to, you at least know on the physical materialist level that your DNA, your epigenetic memory, you've got ancestors who have done this thing before. It's literally encoded within you. Everything that every single one of them has ever done, thought, experience is in there. So you could also just kind of sink into your own body and kind of talk to your DNA and say, hey, I know you have the keys. Like, I know you've got this information in there. Let's just release that part of my genetic code that remembers, the piano or meditation or whatever it is. It really is sort of a mind over matter thing, right? You're inviting the energy is one important aspect of this. You're doing it in love and honor, which is the sort of grease that, allows the wheel to turn more easily. and you're trusting yourself and that this information actually exists and that you can connect with it. And I think all of those are just important ingredients.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for sharing it that way. I'm gonna need to come back in just 1 minute, okay? So it'll be just a second for the audience, but I'll be right back. Yeah, you know what? From what you were speaking, many things came, and one of them was that when we're looking at it from the perspective of the DNA and the ancestors, the phrase that you are your ancestors is what came to me. Like, we tend to again to only it's like, wow, so beautiful and so complex in a beautiful way, that we reincarnate, or the soul reincarnates, but then again, every body that it inhabits is also at the same time part of a lineage of incarnate beings, or of incarnate DNA, let's say. And the current expression of the family tree, that is you, that is your body and your brain, whatever, your nervous system, this is not just like something separate from its ancestors. You know, it's like the new version whatever 0.0 of the ancestors. So it, like you were saying, it carries all the information of them. Not all of it is expressed. You know, there's in genetics, I think there's this like expressed genes and genes that are turned off or something like that. So there's, the genes are there, they're just turned off. So the still woo-woo part for people would be that, oh, so you can talk to the DNA like you were talking to a person and tell it to activate something. Okay, but yeah, just try it out. And then the other thing was that it's so beautiful, and again, we keep forgetting how simple these techniques can be. You know, just you can talk to your past lives and to even to your higher self. You can bring those skills and abilities just by intention. You know how powerful that is what I was thinking about.
Yeah. I mean, we are, even at the materialist level, these attenuators of and transmitters of information, right? Our brain, people even sometimes talk about consciousness in that way, that our brain is this, antenna, and we're just sort of picking up on this level of consciousness, and then we're able to, package it and send it back out via our voice or what we create or what we write, right? And so we're receiving information, we're sending information out, we're receiving information, we're sending information out. Well, everything else in the universe is similar to some extent, even though some of them seem very simplified or pared down to us, right? A rock even is receiving information, even if the information is just the sunlight, and the way it's receiving it is to heat up a little bit, right? That's still receiving information and it's transmitting information. So one way that we say this in the spiritual level, it's the same thing, we're just saying it in a different way, as we say everything has a soul, which is just to say that everything has an information field, right? And the field, even, you can let go of that word if you need to, and you can just say everything is information. Right? So your DNA is no different. Your DNA has a soul, or another way of thinking of it is your DNA is information. It receives information and it relates information. It transmits information. So it's no different from anything else. So why couldn't it? I can talk to Rafa. Rafa's an information receiver and transmitter. Why couldn't I talk to my soul or rock or anything else? And lots of people just feel stupid doing it, or they just don't want to do it, and that's cool. But you can do it. You can receive information from anything. You can send information to anything. Right? That is the universe. It's a universe of relation and of information transmission. So you can apply that in whatever ways you want. And once I really, really understood that, I'll talk to my eyes. If my eyes hurt, I'll be like, hey, eyes, I love you. You're doing a great job. I know that you're healing yourself from whatever's going on right now. And if I can, I'm going to support you in whatever way I can. It's going to be okay. Thank you for being eyeballs. You're doing a great job, right? And then like my eyes are better, faster, right? Or all these different things. And again, some people are going to hear that and go, man, what a crazy person. But I'm like, I have such a greater level of connection with myself. I have a greater level of empowerment for what I can accomplish in my life and with myself, at every level, the emotional, the mental, the physical, the soul level, all of it. And so why not do that? At the very least, it's a practice in positivity. It's a practice in switching that attitude we were talking about when we were talking about the shoulder, right? The attitude is actually what makes it a burden or not. So, just switch that a little bit. And all of those are good things. There's only good outcomes to them. So yeah, talk to everything. Everything is waiting for you to have a conversation with it.
I think that one of the bridging, and I love the idea of talking to your eyes and to your different body parts, to our shoulders, like we're going to do the mantra.
Yeah.
One of the bridging things, if we wanted to bridge the gap to the more materialistic guys, would be that experiment with water and voice and intention. And so like if you were to speak to the water in your eye and tell it beautiful things, from that experiment, it kind of the consequence or whatever is kind of that, okay, say good things to the water in your eye and see what happens. And the eye, I guess it's like very mushy, very watery, so who knows. And the other one was, we were talking about language when we started and how it can sometimes confuse things, but again, at the same time, it's so beautiful, and so everything is so poetic and so right brain that we just don't realize it. At the same time, language carries truths like hidden in plain sight. So you were just talking about information, and if you look at that word, it says information. So everything, you said everything is information, but we just go blah 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 blah, and we don't realize what we're actually saying. Like beneath the words themselves, we're saying everything is information, everything is alive, everything is constantly forming itself. It's constantly coming into being, coming into form, and mutating and evolving. And the karma that we were speaking, everything is transforming constantly. So everything is alive, everything is conscious, everything has a soul, because everything is informations. And that's like one of those beautiful gems that we gloss over just because we're so used to saying information.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful point. I love that. While you're describing this, I was just like remembering too, that the soul of each of these things like loves being what it is. We have this idea, and it's a judgment that we're like, oh, a rock is just a rock, it's not that important. But the rock is like so happy to be a rock. The rock is just being what a rock is, and it's doing what rocks do. And that's exactly what it was formed for. It's what it's in formation for, and that's what it chose to be. In my understanding, we were rocks once too, and we loved it. This is what we're doing, right? And so each thing wants to be acknowledged and appreciated for what it's doing. Yeah, look at that. That is so beautiful. And each thing has its beauty. Each thing has its purpose. And this is part of that, we hear this, like, the more we're in gratitude for the things around us or the stuff in our life or whatever, the better, the more we'll get or the more we'll receive. And it's true in the moment itself, right? When you're like picking up your butter knife to use it, if you're like, what a great butter knife, like it's crafted perfectly, it does its function, like I love you, butter knife. You're just already receiving more just because you're in this moment of appreciation, right? That this thing is this. Last night I had to cover up my chickens have this chicken run, right? And it was going to snow, and they won't come out of their pen if there's snow in the way. So we have to cover it, make sure no snow is in their pathway so they can get out in the morning. They're very pampered little chickens. And so we went and found the cover for the run, and we were going to put it on, but it was brittle. It had been outside for a long time. The sun had been hitting it, the rain, everything. And so as I was pulling it out, it was kind of like falling apart. Yeah. And I was like getting mad. I was like, oh, this piece of crap, why is it falling apart? And this is so inconvenient for me. And I stopped in the moment, and I was like, that is not the way to get something out of something, first of all, and it's definitely not the way to keep it intact, you know. And if you could keep it intact with part of your intention, the way to do that would be to say, you can still serve your purpose. I know that you can stay together this one last time. We'll get a new one for the next snowstorm or whatever. So I went into that mode instead of like, no, it's going to unfold fine. It's doing a great job. It's lasted this long. Think about that. That's a really cool thing. It could have crumbled and fallen apart before today, and it didn't, you know, and then it stopped falling apart and it crumbled. And you could say that's just chance. You could say it has nothing to do with any of my attitude, but I know better than that. I know that it responded to that. The field that it has in its formation was happy to be reinforced and to remember, okay, one last time I'm going to stay in this formation and cover this. And it did. It lasted through the night. The path was covered. The chickens were able to emerge this morning, and now it can kind of go to its final resting place, having served one last time its purpose in life. And one last thought on that, you know, I know people have talked about doing like salvia trips, and sometimes on salvia specifically, people have reported living like an entire lifetime as an object. And one of my favorites was this person who lived as a blanket. And then they remember like there was no stress, there was no sort of like, when am I going to stop being a blanket and go back to being a human? Like none of that. There was just this pleasure every time it was used.
I'm trapped in this blanket.
Yeah, there was no trap about it or anything, which is what I would think, like, oh my God, how horrible would it be to be a blanket?
Wow.
But it's a different level of consciousness they kind of dropped into, and they just felt this pleasure at being, every time they were used, like, this is cool, I'm being a blanket, this is my job. And every time they weren't used, just a sort of stasis, like nothing, not like, oh, I wish I were being used, or like, oh, the torture of not, no, just kind of just waiting, like, oh, I'm being used again, how good. Okay, now I'm waiting. And I was like, that is so interesting. I feel like that's probably exactly what objects are doing. Right?
So simple, you know, such a simple life. It's like bliss and yeah, nothing else. I'm fulfilling my purpose. Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. And the more we can bring that, I think, just to like the simple things in our lives, the better everything is going to feel around us. It's all going to be living up to its highest potential. And that's just a good field to be in. We then maybe can live up to our highest potential more easily.
And even blessing the stress, you know, because that blanket or that object doesn't feel any stress because it doesn't have an ego or a human mind.
Yeah.
Which is probably where stress is created. And instead of being in conflict with that part, trying to understand, okay, there's a very big evolution perhaps from inanimate matter into humans. So trusting that and having faith that there is a purpose in everything that comes along with being human. So even the stress, how can God experience stress if he only manifests rocks and so even there's some things in our lives that are very, very hard to be grateful for. But when we start practicing this and reminding ourselves constantly, and even using the objects that we have that even cause stress, like the cell phone, for example, I'm recently being reminded of this app that comes already with the phone, which is called the reminders or something like that. Reminders. It's just a list instead of a to-do list. It's just a reminder of things. Instead of putting there like, oh, I have to go pay my bills, I have to do this thing on this date, and why not start putting there like reminders that pop up every day or several times during the day. I'm also using one that is like affirmations, that every now and then during the day it brings different affirmations, which sometimes it's stupid stuff. Like today I got one that was, I have a nanny. I don't know, like maybe it means that I'm rich and I can have a nanny for my children or something like that.
Weird,
I don't know.
Yeah.
That was one of the stupid ones that I got today, but it even makes me laugh. So I even like those. Or but today it says, I have turned my hobby into my occupation. That's a very good one. Yeah. But so like using all this stuff that causes stress and finding like sometimes my girlfriend had this one that if you know the question, you already know the answer because the answer is in the question. So, okay, I'm stressed by my phone. Okay, so you have the question there. And what's the answer? Okay, the answer is, how can I use my phone? I am actually expressing the answer as a question, but how can I use my phone to work around the stress? Okay, I'll give myself those simple reminders. You can talk to your past selves and bring special abilities just through intention, just through gratitude and connecting and speaking certain words and bringing these kind of reminders constantly, because I was thinking, oh, I wish like Lindsey could like remind me every day of reconnecting to those things, but it's like she can't do that. She can't be all the time focusing on reminding me, but I can remind myself through the extension of my mind that the cell phone can be.
Yeah, I love that, turning this thing that is actually somewhat negative and somewhat a problem for us, or maybe we're even like addicted to it in some ways, but turning that into something that is
Right.
positive and
We're
constructive. Yeah.
we're misusing it, right? It's like just
Right.
like the hammer and the nail. You can use it for creation or for destruction. Yeah.
Right. It's just a tool. It's neutral actually, and we get to decide, which is
Mm.
just like karma. Going
Yeah.
full circle here. Right? It's neutral. It's just a tool of the universe. It's a law of the universe, and we just get to decide how to use it.
Yeah, definitely. And if just as for closing, I want to respect your time, but the conversation is just so much fun when we speak. What let's give this a little bit more clarity in the ideas of past lives and future lives. Before you said something like in the other part of the conversation, you mentioned this past life connected to the shoulder pain, and you gave a small snippet of like this is my past life, the one right before this one, but I don't know if that's how the soul experiences it. So and that gave me some clarity that the soul, if we wanted to put it in a kind of linear thing, which again it's not exactly what happens, but just as a map, I think we could maybe see the different lessons that the soul is learning, and we could put the different reincarnations in a kind of line that of the evolution of those lessons, or of the understanding, or of the learning of those lessons. Maybe in that sense you could say, okay, so first the soul incarnates in the 1970s. It learns something about the carrying on your shoulders and the elitism and whatever. Then it goes to whatever time in the 1300s and learns a little bit more about that. Then it moves to the year 1,500,068, and then it infinite things. And some of those lives might be on Earth, but some of them might be on a different planet, on a different dimension. Who knows the extent of this?
Yes.
But then eventually it comes into this lifetime in 2023, 22. Sorry, I'm already skipping ahead.
Ready.
And so, and that is a possible way of placing the different incarnations in a kind of timeline that is different from the timeline from the human perspective of year 1, year 2, year 3, 2020, 2021, 22, 23. That is more, rather than from the perspective of, I don't know, the sun going around the earth, it's from the perspective of the lessons being learned and updated onto the server, or whatever that is the soul. But then again, like I was just saying, that's not the whole picture, because this linear thing is just a way for our human mind to understand it. But I wanted to get your take on past lives and future lives, to see how they map to my own understandings.
Yeah, it's really interesting because none of my memories of my other lives come from the future. And that makes me wonder if there is some aspect of sort of linearity to it. But I also know, for example, the lives that I've remembered, one was near year 0. One was definitely somewhere more in like the sort of Middle Ages. One was in what I like to call cowboy times, the Wild West here in the United States.
Fun
Um,
times. Yeah.
right. And then there was the one I just mentioned in the sort of 70s is what it seemed like. Also here in the United States. So a lot of them have been also centered around this area. I had one that came from prehistoric times, pre-recorded history, I should say, it seemed like, in somewhere near Central America. So all of them are in the past, and they're kind of scattered around, you know, what we kind of already know about history, right? But when I've had other people's lives come through, I've had some that are from really, really prehistory, like times that we don't even acknowledge existed on
Mm.
Earth, right? Like what we might call Atlantis or those sorts of ideas. So I haven't seen that for myself, but I've seen it for other people. And even in other people's readings, I've never had a single one from the future. So I don't know if that's a limit of my expectation and my consciousness. So it's just not coming through because I'm not expecting it or looking for it or something. But it feels more to me like it's that we're not actually, the future is not quite created yet, right? It's like it's all the potentials are moving into it, but like which one actually forms, like we're not quite sure until we get there. Not to say that there's not people who look into the future, right? And like that's what a lot of psychics are doing. But you'll notice even people who are really powerful psychics who are really good at predicting and they
Mm.
nail things most of the time, sometimes they just don't. And that's, I always point to this and I always
Mm.
come back to the same sort of hypothesis, which is that the future isn't written yet, actually. There's just that karmic energy that's in store that we were sort of talking about of like it's most likely given all this karma now that like here's what's probably going to happen, but it's technically possible that we go another way. So I don't think we've lived the future yet. I do think they are past lives for a reason. I don't, though, you know, given the list of times that I just mentioned that are what I'm dealing with in this current life, it doesn't seem super linear of how we experience the past lives. You know, and rather which aspects of which lives are coming into this life to be healed, released, transformed, you know, or learned from, doesn't have to be linear. It can dabble through all of this, right?
Mhm.
And even when I look at that sort of, it's hard to describe almost, but when I look at that cluster of lives that I've had memories from, and the clusters of things that seem like the traumas from those lives that I am
Mm.
healing in this life, they're all connected, right? But
Mhm.
I'm sure I could have had a totally different cluster of patterns and energies from different lives that I chose to focus on in this life. You know, but the sort of momentum of it was such that like this is what I came into this life with, those patterns in the sort of makeup of what was going to be in front of me in this manifestation.
Mm. Yeah, that's beautiful. Mm. For me, through the Akashic Records readings, I've received um, the understandings, or at least the map. Let's say that everything is happening at the same time. So we think about a past life, and we think, oh, this happened. Yes, from the perspective of this body, again, like I was saying before, but at the same time, it's happening right now. That's why it's possible to connect with that person, let's say, or with the abilities that were developed there. Because if it had already happened that it was lost, there would be no way to connect to it. But it's still like saved in the Akashic record, and for that reason, it's still happening. It's like not really, but kind of like it's kind of looping in a certain way. It's always present and it's happening at the same time, and it's so complicated to put into words, because it's like every point in that particular life, past life, is happening at the same time as well. So you could reach
Yes.
abilities that they developed when they were 10, when they were 50, when they were, and it's interesting how you said about the future not being as the image that came for me was like dust, that's floating here. Part of it is settled on the floor. That could be the present or the past, maybe. And as you go towards the more floaty parts of the thing, it's there, but it's not exactly frozen in place, let's say. And there's different pathways that can be taken and different timelines that can be experienced, and we can actually choose any of them, because everything is like mycelium, like connected. Everything is connected to everything else. Every point is connected to every other point. And one more thing, in one of the readings as well, this was beautiful. We were connecting to a past life of this person that had that was a very let's say a high priestess, right? I think it was in Egyptian times, and she was I'm not even sure if it was Egyptian times, but it was in Egypt or in in that area. I'm not really sure of what time it might even be, like you were saying, something Atlantean or something, but
Yeah.
it was during that, or in that part of the world, let's say. And she was like, the person getting the reading was kind of feeling insecure about her own abilities. She was a person with very, very strong like psychic abilities. She's able to see and stuff like that, but she wasn't very convinced in her abilities and very secure about them. So connecting to this life helped her to feel more empowered in her own abilities today, in part because in one moment, this other lifetime, from the information that was coming through, this lifetime was like elevated. It was like, oh, she was a very powerful spiritual healer and a high priestess, and from this it's not dynasty, is not the word, but from this let's say spiritual lineage. And she was like, wow, whatever. And at a certain point, a message that came from her to the person getting the reading was, I look at you the same way that you look at me, with that reverence, with that, it's like, oh wow, look at what my future self is going through, and what she's doing, and everything that she is and she knows, and all the power that she has. And it was like, wow, this kind of freed her, of feeling so small. It's like, oh wow, this part of me that she also already had a kind of knowing that something kind of like that had happened in a previous life. So when we brought this part of her, she kind of knew her. And so this part of me that I'm so enamored with, or that I praise so much, that I feel like this was me, and today I'm nothing like even close to that. This part of me actually kind of venerates me for everything that she's learning from me. And that was a very powerful moment for this person.
Yeah, how beautiful is
Yeah.
that? That's a really good example too of the healing we can receive just by
Mhm.
connecting to some of our past lives. When we're talking about the future, maybe this can be our sort of final thought, but I have two examples of my own lived experience that show that the future can affect the past and in fact change the past. And so in a way, this would be what we might call time travel, right? A lot of the things we've been talking about are a method of time travel, right? And I talk about it in this way because we are literally traveling in time and actually going to these places and bringing information there, and therefore we are shifting and changing things. But one, I won't go into the sort of details, it would take much too long, but I had an experience where I was talking to somebody at a fire, and they were having this vision strike them, and they were telling me what they saw about me. And as they were telling me this, I remembered experiencing it years previously in a shamanic journey. And actually, the experience of it was what saved me from a pretty dark experience that could have been really dangerous for me, right? And they were experiencing it right then, and they were actually traveling back to that time to free me in this journey from a little trap I had fallen into and didn't know how to get out of. Their consciousness in the future, and I didn't even know them at the time of the journey. I met them years later, and then they had this vision, and they did not know of my previous experience. So that doesn't even make sense, right? Like the thing happened in the past, but it actually happened in the future. And if it didn't happen in the future, who knows what would have actually happened in that moment, in that journey, right? Things would have been very different for me. So that was a very interesting example of that. We're talking about the past, the future does exist. We're just like, we're deciding like which of those, like you said, which of those pathways we're actually on. And so which one becomes solid and sort of real. And so it doesn't quite exist, not fully, not perfectly yet. But the past is kind of similar, because if we can go back and we can change that, then it's kind of just as malleable, right? And this is part of that, going back to our inner child, going back to that, you know, you were talking about you going back to your shoulder, you know, when this pain started, or when you were experiencing it, and talking to yourself then, that's going to change this current moment of now and the future. This is literally time travel. This is literally changing the past. So another example is one of my past lives I remembered. By the time I connected with this and saw all the trauma and all the pain and everything, I then followed, which I didn't normally do in these, when these memories occur, I don't normally really follow them for too long. I kind of drop in for the moment of the trauma, understand the life up to that point to an extent, you know, I like have my memories and my understanding of who and what I am intact, experience the trauma, and then kind of leave again. Well, I followed this version of me for a minute instead, and I saw that they were going on their way to kill themselves. And I knew that they cannot do that. I don't know why even, right? I don't think there's really too big of a problem with, I mean, that's a whole other conversation we can have, but I'm not saying that like you can't, there's something, you'll go to hell, or, you know, like this, there's other aspects of karma that may happen from that. But for some reason, it was really important that this version of me did not give in and did not kill themselves, given how horrible their experience had just been. And so I was very strongly trying to communicate with them. And it was really difficult, because now I had to stop being them and be me now, but also me then, but also like talk to myself. It was very difficult to pull off, but I kind of asked for all my, you know, guides and allies to come help me do this. And I was basically screaming through like gelatin or something, you know, like it was really hard. And I was just trying to get to them and stop, you have to stop. And they finally stopped and like saw me for a second, and they were so shocked. And I just said, I love you so much. I am you. You're nothing but love. It's going to be okay. You don't have to do this. And that's all I really got through. And then the connection kind of stopped. I don't think they killed themselves. So that happened how many hundreds of years ago? That it didn't happen because of the experience I'm having hundreds of years from then, right? So again, time is very fluid actually, and it's not necessarily super easy, but you can actually go and accomplish massive changes no matter in which direction in time. So I just wanted to share those examples of this retrocausality, you know, in motion.
Yeah, those are weird things that even surprise you, because it's like you generally don't even think those things are possible. You don't even get those kind of ideas, and then you have a particular experience, and something like lights up inside you, you know. It's like something that you never thought you could think, and you were actually causing it and doing it.
Yes, exactly. I was not expecting that or looking for it at all.
And another kind of way of looking at time that I am still not trying, there is no try, like Yoda would say, and that I'm still like unfolding and putting into words, is thinking of time more like space than like time, or than a line. Thinking of time more like an area, or a, you know, like a page, like even like a planet, or like a space, not like a planet, but like a space, you know. And so everything is happening at the same time, and all the potential timelines and the potential past timelines and futures and etc., every incarnation of every person, etc., it's all a space, you know. And that's why you can access any point of it in the now, because everything is happening at the same time. So just like space, every action of every person, let's say, that's alive today, is happening at the same time somewhere else on the planet. So somebody right now is sneezing over in China. Somebody at the same time that they were sneezing, somebody was shouting. Somebody was jumping into a pool. Somebody was driving, turning right on their car or whatever, etc., etc. Infinite. Somebody was being creative. Somebody is giving birth. Somebody is dying. Everything is happening at the same time. And with time, I'm getting this way of understanding it more like space, to understand more the nature of it, which in the end is kind of illusory as well. But sometimes thinking of things in these new ways bridges us towards a more a less illusory understanding in the end, but more expansive. So yeah, that's one that I'm working with.
Yeah, I love that. It's true. I think of it as sort of the toroidal field, right? And that's a helpful structure for me to imagine. I just was guided to open this book again, this Heal Your Body by Louise Hay, to a random page, and I happened to open to suicide, since we were just talking about suicide. And so I want to read the sort of problem, and then the mantra or the solution. And the problem energy, or the however you want to think of that, is that we see life only in black and white and refuse to see another way out, which was definitely that life's energy in that moment that I was connecting with that life. So if anyone out there is relating to that, this is the energy of suicide, right? And it makes sense. We're like, oh, I can't live this way, so I'm going to die, right? Or this is never going to work out, so I'm going to die. It's like black or white, it's this or that. So here's the mantra that's the sort of solution energy to bring in to help release that. And it's, I live in the totality of possibilities. There is always another way. I am safe. And that is exactly the energy I was trying to give to that version of me in that moment of like, look, it's not just this or that. There's something, you are loved. There's always a way, it's going to be okay. So I love that. And I'm glad I was guided to open to that, just in case anyone out there needed to hear it.
Yeah,
as
for
well,
sure.
Since it came up.
Yeah. Those confirmations, talking about that and then getting the random page. This has been again a wonderful conversation, Lindsey. Thank you so much for your time. I know we went a little bit over time, but time is like space, so whatever.
it's just all at once. So yeah, thank you so much for inviting me back. It's always so great to talk to you. You're an excellent conversationalist and host, so thank you.
Hey, thank you. And so again, you can find Lindsey on, I don't want to do your thing for you, but rogueways.org. That's cool. You have beautiful sharings there, writings, channelings, and the stuff that you share, like tarot readings and stuff like that. I mean, I'm so tempted to do a past life tarot reading and to get some help for this new year that's starting. And so you can find Lindsey over there, and you can find me right here and right now. You can also search for Atman Rafa on Instagram if you wanted to get in touch with me. And I'm really thankful for not just for Lindsey, of course, but for everybody that's been following this beautiful journey for me creating this podcast and the practice of the weekly. Sometimes I've not done this weekly, the releasing of an episode, and I'm starting to share also some of my music and to share it in a kind of long format for meditations and stuff like that. So I'm really happy about that. And well, I've also got some beautiful meditative and kind of crazy music on Bandcamp. You can also find the link for that. If it's not in the description, you can find it by going to the YouTube channel, and on the top right, there's a link for that. I've also got a Patreon page that you can join and be a patron of this beautiful co-creation that we're all doing here. And thank you so much, everybody. Lindsey, any closing words?
I'm just really grateful, and I love that you also have meditative music. Now I have to go listen to that and connect on that level. But yeah, thank you. And I just always hope that when we come together like this, that people are receiving, what they need or what they're looking for from it. And I think that is the best reason, to have these conversations. You and I both get to grow and expand and see things from different perspectives, but also there's all these other people who get to connect and find what they need. And so I just want to send that love and gratitude out to your audience as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll be seeing you on the next Mystic Times. Bye-bye.
Bye.